Level up your LA Kings experience with Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access and rewards. Enjoy great seats to the game in Section 103 along with Yamava Club access and parking included with your purchase. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings shop item at the game. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn perks on each purchase from the only leading ticket company with a rewards program. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings. Did you know the LA Kings have their own culinary partner? It's Superfood, celebrating 10 years and over 1 million meals served. Since 2020, the Kings have trusted Superfood to fuel their players. Now through Simply Lunch, you can bring that same performance-driven food to your office. Because when people eat better, they work better. Visit mysuperfood.com. That's mysuperfd.com. Or call 213-973-6145. Qualified companies can enjoy a free lunch for up to 10 managers.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Welcome back, Kings fans, to a new episode of All the Kings Men. Joining me now, Michael Russo from The Athletic. How are you doing today, Michael?
Great. How are you, Jesse?
Do you prefer Michael or Mike? I just asked you how you like to be introduced.
Honestly, it doesn't matter. Most people just call me by my last name.
All right, Mike. Perfect. Yeah. All right, so we're here to talk about Matt Zuccarello. And generally speaking, when the Kings acquire a new player, I have a bunch of sort of stock and questions that I like to get through. But I have the biggest question looming in my mind is one that you may not know the answer to. And that is when Matt Zuccarello and Kevin Fiala played together in Minnesota, it was 3 seasons. I looked it up, and basically they never played together.
Yeah.
Like, not never, but infrequently enough that it could be explained by just, well, sometimes there's line changes, sometimes guys jump over the boards and they just wind up on the ice together. I think it was like 30 seconds a game on average or something like that. So was there a reason that those two players never played together?
It was mostly because, if I remember correctly, Fiala mostly played left wing in Minnesota, and Matt's always played with Kirill. So they had an incredible relationship, incredible on-ice chemistry. And Kevin and Matt's would get on, obviously, the power play together and things like that. But at even strength, it was pretty much always Matt's and Kirill constantly for as long as Kirill's been in Minnesota, which started the 21 season, actually coincidentally in LA, back-to-back games.
I remember those games.
Yeah. And Matt's, if I remember actually correctly, was actually hurt. I think he had elbow surgery and missed the first month of that season, if I remember. And then started playing the second Matt's got back during that pandemic shortened season. He never left Kirill's side. But I know that Matt's and Kevin Fiala were really good friends. Obviously, there's a Panarin relationship too. LA from the very beginning, Jesse, made all the sense in the world to me for him to go to, because between Fiala and Panarin and Kempe, all these great skilled players, it puts Matt's in a real good position to succeed and be able to, put pucks on a platter. And there's still few players in the NHL that's as good as passer as Zuccarello.
So the reason I'm so interested in the question is the Kings they have more talent on the wing than they do at center.
Yeah.
And Anze Kopitar has departed. And so now the question has become, at least for this summer, and obviously there's no way of knowing this until training camp, but who's going to play center on that top line? Because my assumption is that Panarin and Kempe will be given every opportunity to play on the top line.
Right.
But Byfield's never played between the two of them. And so then if Fiala's on the second line and Zuccarello doesn't play with Fiala, then Zuccarello kind of has to be on the top line. But I don't know if that's the type of player he really is or has. It sounds like he was Kaprizov's running mate, but is that, player dependent, or is that just the role that Matt Zuccarello played?
It's definitely, he could play even at his age, and he could play top 6 minutes easily. Mm-hmm. And obviously in Minnesota, he was essentially your top line right wing for a long, long time. Now, at times last year, there was always that there'd be times where Zuccarello would play with Boldy in the middle with Kaprizov, or they would just go to Erik Boldy and Kaprizov, and we called that the Wild's version of the nuclear option, and Zuccarello would play on the second line. I don't really think it matters. Like, I think if you play him with Fiala or Panarin, he's going to be easily, productive for both those guys. The question, this very much sounds like what we talked about in Minnesota for years: is who's the center.
Yeah, that's honestly, that's the only reason it matters to me, because they have Byfield, and then it's, well, gosh, are they going to try and make Kempe a center, or are they going to bump Erik Haula up to second?
Yeah, and look, Haula obviously played here for a long, long time, and I think that he could play top 6 minutes too, even at his age. I mean, he's extremely skilled player. He's still got great wheels. So it will be interesting how they do that. But I will say with Zuccarello, the Minnesota for years has lacked that true number one center. And, Zuccarello is the type of guy that the way that he passes the puck, he's almost a center on whatever line he is from the wing. He's just got that incredible innate ability to draw defenders to him, and create open ice for his very skilled wingers, whether it's Panarin or Fiala. And I assume he's going to play with one of those two there. So I obviously, I think the Peter will figure it out on what he wants to do there in LA in terms of the centers. But in Minnesota, they were never top heavy with center during any of the years. And Mats was an extremely productive player. And I don't think it's just because of Kirill. I think you put him with any skilled winger, and he's going to be able to really create plays. And he'll do it on the power play. He'll do it at even strength. He doesn't have the greatest wheels, but he's never had that. I mean, he's always, he's thought with his mind and not his legs in a lot of ways. I mean, that's the way that I remember Marty St. Louis used to put it. So he's just a really, really good player.
So a lot was made this summer of how the Kings, who were already a vintage team, let's say, and they didn't get any younger. Matt Zuccarello is 38 years old.
Yeah,
he'll be 39 in September.
Yep.
With the departure of Andrei Kopitar, I didn't think that they could find older players to sign, but they have. But it sounds like that is not going to be a problem.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, obviously, like Lawton and Perry. I mean, who knows how they're going to come in and perform? I mean, Perry is, as you guys saw, I mean, he could still play the game at a high level and put him up in the lineup as well. But Mats is still a very, very productive player. Like, we have not seen him fall off in terms of his production here at all. They had one of the top power plays in the National Hockey League last year. I think third best during the regular season. He was a huge, huge part of that. He could play multiple positions in terms of the power play on either flank. So I don't think the age is a big thing with him. Now, he's not the fleetest of foot. There's no doubt about that. And most, if you look at his even strength numbers with Kirill, they've been down. He gets a lot of his points on the power play. But, to me, when I look at LA, obviously age is an issue there. But I also think that skill is an issue. And I think that they've got, to figure out a way to maximize, Panarin, Fiala, and I think that Mats is the perfect guy that could do that. So there were a lot of teams that went after him. Anaheim was after him. Nashville was after him. Minnesota really just kind of walked away from him, thought it was time to rip the Band-Aid off. But it had nothing to do with him getting older. I think it was more to just start anew. The one thing about Mats is he does like an East-West brand of hockey. Give and goes. He's, him and Kirill were always on the same page together. And a lot of times that would sort of alienate some of the other players, not in terms of the way they felt about him, but it sometimes felt like a two-man, team. And that's when the Wild, they weren't skilled enough to get away from a north-south game. And when things turned awry in the playoffs, I just think that Bill Guerin just decided that, that they've got to start anew. I don't know how that's going to affect guys like Kirill, but I think it's going to help LA because I think they, adding a skilled player like Mats can only help.
The funniest evolution of teams in the NHL has been the LA Minnesota matchup that was 10 years ago a 2-1 north-south slogfest and has sort of metamorphized into this bizarre, much more quicker paced affair than it used to. I mean, He used to be able to fall asleep to a Wild Kings game in the past. You may not know the answer to this one either, but Hockey Reference has started listing nicknames of players on their bio page. Matt Zuccarello has a few listed. Zook and Zuki make perfect sense. I'm assuming Zooks is also in the rotation, although it didn't make the list. But the Norwegian Hobbit Wizard?
Wow, I've not heard that one.
Yeah, I was going to say, does anybody actually call him that? Because that sounds suspiciously made up to me.
Yeah, that I have never in my life heard that.
Okay.
Paul Fenton called him a lizard. That's
yeah.
Here.
The Lizard and the Lizard King are also listed.
But I will do me a favor, ask Matt's about that nickname and tell me what he says, and we'll see what his reaction is. Because the one thing you'll learn about Matt's, one thing you'll learn about Matt's is he's got an incredible sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
He is the life of the party. I mean, that is one thing. Like, I know that sometimes fans scoff at this and roll their eyes at the quote unquote room and being good in the room. I am telling you, but like this guy. Like you look at the pregame videos in the room and the hype fests and the when he does the music jams and the dance parties in the locker room when he announces the starting lineup. I mean, that is a lot of energy that is going to be taken out of Minnesota's room, and I think that can only help him walk into that room and feel comfortable, and guys love him. I mean, he's a hilarious guy, and I think he's going to fit in like a glove there.
I don't remember who asked the question. I was just watching his introductory press conference again. Maybe it was Zach Dooley asked what his role was going to be in LA. And I think he said, I'm going to be the captain, the general manager. So he seems very funny. I've been mocked plenty of times before because I would refer to what you were just talking about as far as the room as the power of friendship. And I am convinced that the Kings made the playoffs in 2021-22 more because of the chemistry in the room, or the power of friendship as I call it, than any other reason. I mean, that team just got along and they liked each other, and it seems like Matt Zuccarello is a great guy for that.
Yeah, and he's incredibly self-deprecating. He's incredibly accountable. He's the only player that I've ever covered in my career, and this is going to be my 32nd season covering the National Hockey League coming up, that only wants to talk after losses. It is hard to find him after a win. And even if he has 3-4 assists, he doesn't want to talk. It's like he wants to be sometimes the spokesman of the team. There was a game last year where Jesper Wallstedt got shelled. And it was, Mats was well aware when we put his number on. He was pulled in the game, and he was well aware when we put his number on the board that we were going to, probably go after him and ask pointed questions about the way that he played. And we didn't ask for Mats that night. And all of a sudden we walk in the room and we're waiting for Wallstedt and we don't see his number on the board. And all of a sudden I look and 36 is on the board. He went over to the board, erased Wallstedt and 36 because he wanted to stand up for the guy and give him the night off from us. I didn't exactly love that we didn't get to talk to Wallstedt tonight, but that's the type of person he is. He's very aware of social media, things being said, and what that has done to today's world. He's very eloquent when you talk to him about stuff like that. He's just really, I think he's going to fit in really well there. And the other thing about the contract is it's if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and they could trade him at the deadline. I mean, he's put himself in, heck, I've even brought it up. If it doesn't work, there's always a chance he just says, I'll come back to Minnesota. There's always that chance. So I like the contract that they gave him. Let's put it that way.
Well, I'm really glad you told me that story about the loss and Wallstedt, because I find it very conspicuous who's available and who isn't after certain games. And there are some players that I have often thought ought to be first in line for certain pivotal games, and if they go poorly, I think there are certain players. I mean, there's one of my favorite things about Jonathan Quick and Rob Scuderi is if there was a tough patch, they would be the first ones out there. So that's wonderful to hear. I look forward to that. Michael Russo, thank you so much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, Jesse.
Joining me today from Nashville, Tennessee, Brooks Bratten, beat reporter for the Nashville Predators. How are you doing today, Brooks?
Jesse, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
So we're here today to talk about Erik Haula because he was signed by the LA Kings, and I have a ton of questions about the Kings' upcoming season, and a lot of them will hinge on what role Erik Haula plays for the LA Kings. He can play center or wing. So, I mean, my first question is in Nashville. We'll start with 2025-26 because he had 2 stints in Nashville while you were there. But in his most recent season, which was last season, did he play primarily wing or center?
Primarily center,
Okay.
but like you said, he is flexible. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife in that way. You can plug him in lots of different spots and up and down the lineup too, but primarily in the middle of the ice.
Now I'm looking at his numbers for faceoffs, and he took, I mean, over 900, I mean, almost 1,000 faceoffs, really, actually over 1,000 faceoffs. So you said he primarily played center. Is he a bottom 6 center, a top 6? If called upon, could he reliably play a 2C role?
I do think so. I think he's a guy that, especially, at this point in his career, he's been around the block. And I think ideally on a team, depending on the depth, especially at the center ice position, I think you'd have him as maybe more of a 3C. But if need be, I think a 2C is definitely doable. I mean, he's also a guy that, like I said, with the ability to play up and down the lineup, wasn't necessarily all the time a second power play guy, but he is definitely capable of that as well. And there were times where he was on that second unit because he does have a little bit of offense in his game. So I think he's not going to be your top center at any given night, but
No.
I think in that middle of the lineup he can really fit in a lot of different areas for sure.
I hadn't thought about power play time, but that's an interesting detail to add because I could, my thought is just because of his familiarity with UL Armia and the tandem that they formed on Team Finland in the Olympics most recently, I sort of anticipated the two of them being on the third line together. And I would expect both of them to be on the same penalty kill unit together. But looking back at his numbers, it seemed like he was on the second unit on the PK. And now you're saying the second unit on the power play. I could easily see him centering the second power play unit for the Kings just because the Kings don't have a lot of centers and they may want to top load their number 1 power play unit with, all of the offensive players they have who might also play center. But is he like if you were running a team, would you expect to see him over the boards first on a PK, or maybe is he part of that second unit?
I think for me, he's probably, I think of him being a penalty killer first,
Mm-hmm.
uh, as opposed to power play. But like I said, he's certainly capable of filling that position. I feel like it was a case of, you know, maybe he wasn't on the power play as much unless there was a guy or two out of the lineup
Sure.
due to injury. Maybe he was a good option in that realm. But as far as the penalty kill is concerned, definitely a top option in that way. And that was something that, Predators head coach Andrew Burnett talked about last season, even at the beginning of the season during training camp, when he was asked about Erik Haula. And that was something he mentioned right away, was that he was planning to and did use him quite often on the penalty kill as a guy who, again, has just done it for a large portion of his career and knows what it takes on the PK for sure.
I mean, I'm just looking at his faceoffs right now. He had 1,005 total. 857 of those come at even strength. 77 come on the power play. 71 come shorthanded. But obviously, shorthanded situations, you're sort of what side of the ice is dependent on. Now, he also had a stint in Nashville in 2000, 2001, or excuse me, 2020, 2021. um, that was a weird season. If I remember correctly, that was the COVID shortened season. But how much did his game change in between 2020, 21 and 25, 26? Or was he the same guy when he came back?
Yeah, I think you knew what you were getting, and that's and that's consistency, and it's not. I was reading something that Zach Dooley wrote the other day on Erik Haula, and just the kind of player you're expecting to get, and he mentioned just the consistency, and he's never going to be at the top of the score sheet or the stat list rather, but he's never going to be at the bottom either. And I was just reminiscing. There was a huge overtime goal that Haula scored that first season during the COVID season in 21 in Nashville. And there were moments like that. I don't think that he's also someone that, I don't know that you're ever going to say, maybe the casual fan especially is ever going to say, wow, like Erik Haula is really tearing it up or lighting it up tonight. But at the same time, you know what you're going to get, and you're never going to be let down. And I think especially too, just to touch on the previous season as well, when he was traded over from New Jersey back to Nashville for his second stint with the Predators, and he had really talked about, he didn't have a good last season in Jersey, and he still had plenty to prove. He wanted to prove himself, and he was also excited to just get back to a place with some familiarity in his game. And he certainly showed that he still has plenty left in the tank. I mean, he had a good season last year, almost 40 points. He was sixth among scoring in the Nashville roster. And again, I just think that he's a guy, like you said, not a lot of change, right? From 5 years earlier to last season. And I just think that, again, that just speaks to his game, his consistency, and just on a nightly basis, what you're going to get with him. And it's usually a good thing.
At 35 years old, he's not young, but he's also far from the oldest player on the Kings roster this season. I mean, at 35, he's actually not old at all for the Kings. But I feel like that just sort of strengthens what you're saying. Like, he's had a career, right? He's at 840 games. We know what we're getting. If he plays 2 seasons in LA, he'll eclipse the 1,000-game mark in his career. But it seems like as players like him get older, they sort of solidify that role. And so I made this mistake when the Kings acquired Yoel Armia, where I looked at him and I just said, penalty kill. Like, I just said, okay, that's what he's going to be. Then, due to injuries and underperformance from guys up the lineup, Armia wound up being on the power play, wound up playing in the top 6, wound up having a much bigger role than anticipated. So I'm trying to avoid doing the same thing with Haula, where I look at him and I just go, oh, well, he told us that he went to the same high school as Armia. They were on the PK unit in Finland. They hooked up on a couple shorthanded goals. And I'm just like, oh, well, my instinct is to be like, well, Haula will not only make sense within his context, but he will also make Armia make more sense and match expectations. But I mean, but then the Kings just don't have a lot of center option. And so I'm trying to keep an open mind that he may wind up playing up the lineup out of necessity more than anything else.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's certainly possible. And like you said, I did see the other day, it looks like the Kings are the oldest team in the league going into so while he is 35, he's still, he's still not certainly one of the old guys necessarily, maybe. But no, I just think that he's a guy that it was cool to see last season too. Again, I just think a bounce back year, and to prove to himself that, he does still have plenty left in the tank, and he is still capable of being a good, consistent NHL player on a nightly basis. And so, regardless of where he is up and down the lineup, I think that, he cares too, right? Like, obviously everybody cares about winning and you want to win, but I think especially somebody like that at this stage in his career, he's a guy that cares about his team, about his teammates, about winning. And, that's something that's never a bad thing for a guy that's been around the block, knows what it takes in this league. And again, I just think that he's someone, from your perspective in LA that, no matter where he is, and that's, like you said, curious to see where Peter Laviolette ends up putting him, because I think you can use him in a lot of different situations.
How is he in the locker room? The Kings don't have a ton of Finns, but they have Sami Helenius and Yoel Armia. I'm assuming at this point in his career, I mean, we saw him, he spoke to the media, his English seems fine. But how is he in the media? Is he a talk to the media after a loss kind of guy? Is he available, or does he sort of duck out of the room as quickly as possible?
It might depend on the day, honestly,
Sure.
but I think that he's a guy, he certainly takes accountability, right? Like, that's something else that you're going to get with him, is he's a straight shooter. He's going to tell it like it is. And I always enjoy talking to him, because again, you're going to get honesty. If the team's playing well, he's going to say it. If things aren't going well, he's going to say that too. And so, I think he's a good, just veteran guy. Like, I don't know that he's ever had a letter on his jersey, and not that he needs one, not that you need one to be a leader in the room, but, he's a veteran guy that's, again, been around the block. And, I think from that perspective too, it's never a bad thing, because obviously every team still has some young guys. And, I think he's another guy that just, he's professionally comes to work. And I think that he's a good guy for for younger players to look up to in that regard as well. And again, from a media perspective, like it's good to get some honesty, and that's what you're going to get from Erik Haula.
I've spoken to Michael Russo about Matt Zuccarello at this point, and it sounds like the two of them are very similar in that regard. And it'll be nice. I mean, when the Kings were at the peak of their competitiveness, there were a handful of players on the roster who fit that mold, right? Who would come and tell you if things weren't going well. Rob Scuderi leaps to mind. Very, straightforward and honest about the state of affairs. You also had a chance to work for the Predators during part of Peter Laviolette's tenure. Mm-hmm. And if I have questions about some of the new players, I have hundreds of questions about Peter Laviolette, because the Kings under Rob Blake's tenure had Todd McClellan there for 4.5 years, whatever it was, and then Jim Hiller, who was an assistant under McClellan, and then DJ Smith, who was an assistant under Hiller, although Smith came in under Holland's tenure. But the point is, like, under Robitaille, Blake, and McClellan, it felt like there was a pretty predictable set of rules and expectations, and you could anticipate how things would play out. Mm-hmm. We're in year 2 of Ken Holland's GM tenure, and we're about to start year 1 of Peter Laviolette's coaching tenure, and I have no idea what kind of coach he is. I don't know how he likes to. Does he defer to veterans? Is it a true 100% meritocracy, the way people want to pretend sports are, or is it what sports has sort of really been, which is a meritocracy based on who you used to be? So is Peter Laviolette, like, let's say Erik Haula plays terribly, but they need him at center. Is Peter Laviolette the kind of coach who will do what's necessary or do what's right? Assuming that those things aren't always the same thing. That's a huge question. I apologize.
No, sure. No, it makes sense. And I think that, I think that Peter Laviolette is a guy who, again, like he has this reputation around the league that he comes in and really just provides a boost to any team that he joins. Mm-hmm. Guys want to run through a wall for him. I experienced that in Nashville. I loved working with him, and it's especially, and I don't want to say that he's toned it down over the years, because he's still an intense guy, right? But it was fun just as much working with him in the wins as it was the losses, because the losses, like, he wears it, right? Like, he wears it on his sleeve. He hates to lose, as anybody does, but he's a guy that I think, he's gonna do the right thing for the team. To me, and with him and what I've experienced, it's team above all else. He's such a huge culture guy, and I experienced that too, just as someone who works for the team, is around the team. He really wants it to be a family atmosphere, and I know that he's mentioned that even in his dealings in LA so far. And it's so true. I mean, for me, I'm just the beat reporter, right? I'm not playing the game. I'm not in the room every day, but he made me feel like I was a part of the team and a part of the culture. And I think that is such a huge thing with him. And as a result, you get guys to buy in, and you also don't have maybe as many instances where, you've got one guy kind of out of the group, or somebody that needs to sit a night, or it was a really good experience in that regard. And that no matter what, or no matter how things were going, everybody was bought in. Everybody wanted to run through a wall for him and for the guy next to him in the room. And I think that that's something that Laviolette is able to cultivate. I witnessed it firsthand here in Nashville, and I have no reason to believe that he hasn't continued to do that in his stops. So, again, just a huge culture guy, and a guy that is really capable of bringing the group together and making sure that he gets the best out of everybody.
The big question I think a lot of Kings fans have is, if the roster doesn't fit the way he would have built it, right? And there are questions about the blue line and whether or not they're capable or well suited to play the style of play that Peter Laviolette will ask of them. Can he adapt, or can he, find a way to work with whatever they can give? It sounds, I mean, I've only spoken to him once, one-on-one, in a one-on-one setting. I've seen him in a media availability, but he seemed way more flexible than I was expecting.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that, when he came into Nashville, I came in with him in 2014-15. And yeah, like there were some good players on the roster, but by no means was anybody predicting that the Predators, they had just missed the playoffs a couple of years in a row. And, he came in and got a lot out of a lot of different players. They ended up making the playoffs that year. They made the playoffs every year under Peter Laviolette. And the year they went to the final, the Predators were the last team in the playoffs, and they went all the way to the Stanley Cup final the next year when they won the President's Trophy. And I would argue that he did that with rosters that, yeah, like we've always had good players in Nashville, but like the superstar really hasn't been there, but he got so much out of the guys that were there. And I think you've seen that in his other stops as well, is that he's able to adapt and he's able to get some good numbers out of some teams that, yeah, they have good players, but are they really going to be the top of the league? And again, I just think that a coach with the attitude that he has and just the ability to get the most possible out of his players, you can squeak out a few more wins per season. I just think that that's the way that he goes about his business. And I would agree with you. And I think especially, again, as he's gotten older and more mature in his tenure, from what I've seen here in Nashville and then beyond, and just even talking to him again over the years, I just think that he's at a point now where he still loves it. He still has such a passion for it. He's going to do what's right for the team and just do whatever it takes to get the most out of his guys every night.
Well, this is going to be the most painful August in a while for me, just because I have all these questions, and the only way to answer them is to watch training camp and the season unfold. Brooks Bratten, thanks for answering some of them today. Appreciate you joining me.
Jesse, my pleasure. Have a great August. I hope the questions get answered sooner than later.
Yeah, and best of luck to you guys out there in Nashville.
Thanks very much.